In this video, we are going to be reviewing contacts. So what is a contact? Well, in Odoo, you will see that the model is res.partner, and it really is any person, company, or address type object. So let's take a look at these one at a time. First, let's look at it as a company contact. Click on Bakery Essentials here. Outside of saying that it is a company and not an individual, there's not going to be much difference from every other contact in Odoo. So that's something to keep in mind with the company, is that by selecting company, you are really doing two things. You are limiting yourself to not be able to set a company for the contact, and that's to avoid a recursive relationship. But also, when you say that it's a company, you are giving it the context of a company, which means that on other contacts, such as James Smith, who is already associated with Bakery Essentials, if we were to remove that, though, we will see that we can only select other contacts in our Odoo database that are set as company contacts. Send them back to Bakery Essentials and save that. And now we have this child relationship between Bakery Essentials and James Smith. So when we look at Bakery Essentials, we can see James Smith as one of the contacts, and likewise, we just got to Bakery Essentials by clicking the company that James Smith is associated with. We'll also see that if we click on events, what we're really looking at when we look at the events is that from attendees, James Smith is the one that is registered. Bakery Essentials isn't, but because he is a child contact of Bakery Essentials, we get to see some of that information rolled up into these smart buttons, which we'll discuss more here shortly. Now, a contact being a person, I think, is pretty intuitive to most people. So again, the only difference between the company and an individual is setting them as an individual and the ability to select a company that they're associated with. Now, there are different address types as well, and let's talk about what those mean. So James Smith is just set to a contact, but there are other types of contacts as well. And like I said, res.partner or contacts represent any person, company, or address type object. So if we were to set James Smith to anything other than contact, so if he's a contact, we can't modify the address. His address is just the company address. But if we change him to an invoice address, delivery address, or other address, then we are going to be able to change the address associated with James Smith. One other address type is a private address. A private address is special in that it indicates that it's related to, for example, an employee. On an employee record, the private address is what accumulates the receivables and payables, so how much you owe them from payroll, for example. And nobody can access private addresses unless they have the technical setting that allows them access to private addresses. So most often you will not be manually setting somebody as a private address. But let's leave James Smith as a contact and go out and look at some of the other contacts that we have set up here. So we see this purple truck here. This purple truck is here because we haven't replaced the image with something else. So we could choose to upload another image for this contact. But the default image for anything that is set to a delivery address is going to be this warehouse truck. So if we go to Crazy for Candy, we will see that we have the Summer Street warehouse is associated with Crazy for Candy as a delivery address. Sarah, on the other hand, is associated as an invoice address, and we did provide her a more specific image, but if we hadn't, then we would have seen the placeholder image for an invoice address. Now, an other address is just going to be just that, some other address that's associated with this company or individual. I do want to specify that you can have multiple child contacts under individuals as well. So you don't have to be a company to have individual contacts, invoice, delivery, and other addresses associated with you. The very common use case for this might be that somebody is a customer, but they have different billing and shipping addresses, right? So that's the difference between this invoice address and delivery address. And that's why we get to set different types of contacts to inform context in other places around Odoo and to keep this hierarchy of different contacts or addresses that are associated with each other. So if all of that is a little bit confusing, then let's go ahead and create a sale order for Crazy for Candy. So we have Crazy for Candy, and we'll go and create a sale order. So you'll see that because it context, Crazy for Candy is set as the customer because we created a sale order through the smart button on that specific contact. But the invoice address is automatically set to Sarah Jones because we said that Sarah is the invoicing address for Crazy for Candy. And likewise, the delivery address is automatically set to Summer Street Warehouse because of that same association. So by selecting the address type for these contacts that are related to Crazy for Candy, we are giving Odoo context to set some of these details on records throughout Odoo, such as sale orders. Now, of course, if you decided you wanted to select a different invoice address for Crazy for Candy, or really just any different address, then you can certainly do so by selecting something else from this dropdown. But again, this context is really powerful in Odoo. So going back to Crazy for Candy, let's talk about some of the settings on a contact record. So we already talked about the individual versus company, and we already talked about the contacts and addresses. I've mentioned it before, but one thing to note that the only required fields to save a record in Odoo are fields that have a bold underline. So in this case, the only thing we really needed to set to create a contact is the name of the company or individual. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have more information on the record if you happen to have it available. And from extensive use in Odoo, I would say two of the most important pieces of information to have in addition to a name is going to be the phone number and the email address. The email address so you can communicate with this contact through Odoo, and the phone number because most shipping providers require a phone number when you're creating a shipment. So if you don't have one and you're trying to create a shipment for this contact, then you'll get a notice or an error and you'll need to go and fill it in. So might as well be proactive around it. Also because Odoo provides SMS capabilities, in which case you need to have a phone number set to send that SMS. Next, I want to briefly talk about tags. So tags are used to provide additional information about a record. You'll see them in various places throughout Odoo, and they are displayed and filterable. So in this case, I have a tag set that they're a sweets shop. Could also say that they're a reseller. If we save this and we go back out to this view, then we will see the tags with their name and the color we have set right here. So it allows us to really easily visually distinguish between contacts that have some additional information that's important to us. Now, what that information is varies by industry to industry and client to client, but you can also filter by those tags. So I can say that my tag contains reseller, and I will just be filtered down to those records. Next up is our sales and purchase tab. So this allows us to set some information, again, providing context when we are using this contact throughout Odoo. So salesperson, if you set a salesperson, that salesperson will be automatically set as the salesperson on new sale orders that are created for this record. Same with the delivery method. Shipping accounts is an eBoost Suite module that we'll talk more about in another video, but provides the capability of creating shipments on a customer's account. Payment terms will automatically set the payment terms on a sale order and an invoice indicating when payment is due. price list allows you to set a price list that is applicable to this customer. The default will be public price list, but you can create and set other price lists that will be used by default when making orders for this customer. We also have a variety of information down here related to point of sale. So keep in mind as we look at records that some of the fields that you see are dependent on the apps that are installed. So if you don't have certain apps installed, then you may not see all of these fields in your database. And then we have some miscellaneous information here, such as the reference for the customer, their industry, etc. And delivery routes is another eBoo Suite module that we will discuss in another video that provides the functionality to indicate a physical local delivery route for this customer to use by default. Now we have similar things up here in purchase. So payment terms, if you are purchasing from this contact, what your payment terms are for them, you can set a payment method and reminder. So whether or not you automatically send an email to the vendor reminding them that they are expected to send you goods. So you could set that up and say that it'll happen 10 days before a receipt is due, and that will be used in the context of purchasing. And then fiscal position. So fiscal position, we'll get into that in the accounting video series, but it pertains to taxes and in some cases swapping accounts that are used. So we won't touch too much on that. But again, by setting it here on the contact, that is going to be the default setting for sale orders for this contact. If we go into accounting, you can configure the accounts receivable, accounts payable, commission structure, and credit limit. These are both eBoo Suite modules. Commission structure is related to commissions, which allows you to provide commissions to various users when invoices are created for this contact, and credit limit provides exception functionality when this credit limit that you set here has been reached. Bank accounts allows you to add and keep details about bank accounts for this particular contact. For example, if you are using them in the context of ACH transfers. Internal notes. Internal notes allow you to do just that, leave notes that are for internal reference only. So for example, if you wanted to remember your customer's birthday or something like that, you could log that here. You will see the ability to set warnings on contacts just based on configuration. So warnings on sale order. You will also see warnings on purchase order if you have that configured. And really what this does is allows you to say that when you create it in this context, when you create a sale order for this contact, I want to see, whatever warning you have typed in here, but that can be bypassed or blocking message. So display that message and then not allow the user to proceed. So in this context, you may want to set a blocking message if they are a customer that never pays for their goods. You don't want to continue to create sale orders and sell to them. But we will go ahead and leave that as no message. And then partner assignment allows you to geolocate a customer's address. This comes into play several times throughout eBoo Suite functionality. So let's go look at what some of that context does for us. So we had already created a sale order. And when we had created that sale order, using the public price list and immediate payment. But now if we were to create one, we still have our context that sets our invoice and delivery address for us, but we also have a different price list and different payment terms because we have set that on the contact record now. Likewise, if I were to go back to Crazy for Candy, I could choose to make a purchase. And when I do so, we'll see that this receipt date with the ask for confirmation 10 days before, this is set from the contact record. And our payment terms of 21 days, which were specifically for purchasing, is also set on our RFQ. So headed back to Crazy for Candy here, Let's talk about these smart buttons. So smart buttons operate as a way to see a count of records that are related to this record, as well as quickly jump to them. So the smart buttons you see, much like the fields, are going to be dependent on the apps and modules that you have installed. So we'll just look at a few of these. If I click on opportunities, and we're going to jump to opportunities, another thing it does is if I click create, much like on a sale order, we have the context of which contact we came from. And so it will fill as much of the information as it can for us from that contact. And that's what you'll see if you click on any of these other ones as well, right? We're just going to jump to a list, a filtered list of records of that record type that just show us things that are related to this contact or their child contacts. And if we click create, it's going to use the context that it has to create a new record. Going back to Crazy for Candy, we will click on the actions dropdown, and this will show us a few things here. So archive, when you click archive, you'll get a pop-up notice asking if you're sure you want to archive this record. So we will, and then we'll come back and unarchive it. So if we archive it, we get this archived ribbon, and archived records do not show as part of your record set by default. So you can click on filters and then choose to view those that are archived, and you will see them. So we can jump back to Crazy for Candy because they were archived, and we can unarchive them. But really a good use case for this is when you have a contact that's been set up and they have data that is related to them, either meetings or sale orders, or maybe it's even just tracked history of messages and notes. You don't want to delete that record. You may just want to archive it. So you could quickly unarchive it in the future if you need to, because you are interacting with that contact or that record again, or just to see the history or the records that were related to them. So keep in mind though that archiving a contact does not archive their sale orders or anything like that. It's just archiving this particular record. So they don't show up by default when you're viewing a record set. Archive also functions as an alternative to deletion. So while you might want to delete something, maybe you create a contact and you realize it's a duplicate right away, so you delete it. That would be a perfectly fine way to handle that situation. But if you've already done something like confirmed a sale order and delivered goods to them or made invoices, etc., Odoo generally puts up safeguards and tries to protect you from deleting records that have important data related to them. So in some cases, you wouldn't even be able to delete a record, in which case archiving serves a function there as well. In general, I much prefer archiving to deleting if a contact has any records or data associated with them. Next up, we have granting portal access. So granting portal access creates a portal user for this particular contact and sends them an email inviting them to set up their account with you. All you need to do is select in portal and then click apply. You can also include a message to send to the user, and this message is inserted into the portal email. When you click apply, it will create that portal user and send them the email. Now, users have a uniqueness constraint of the email address. So if you get an error telling you that this email already exists, then a user of any type already exists with this email address, and you would need to edit this contact's email address in order to set them up as a portal user. You'll also see this force login URL and generate login URL. These are a part of eBoo Suite functionality for Auth Admin. This allows you to automatically create a URL that allows you to temporarily log in as a customer for purposes of customer support. You can also send an SMS text message, so this would allow you to send a message to this contact. However, keep in mind that you do need credits from Odoo in order to send SMS messages. So if you try to send it and you don't have credits and you don't have an account set up, you will see a notice that that was not successful. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is merging contacts. So merging contacts is useful when you discover that you have duplicative contacts and you need to combine them into a single one. So for example, we have Crazy for Candy, and then we have Crazy for Candy that has no spaces in it. So if we look at this Crazy for Candy, it doesn't have all the information that our other Crazy for Candy has, but it does have a mobile phone number, and this will come in handy to remember momentarily. So if we need to merge these two contacts together, we can go into the list view, search for the name to filter down our list, and then select the ones we wish to merge. You'll then select the action option and choose merge. The destination contact is the contact that will remain when you have completed the merge and is the one that will retain the information. So you'll see all contacts that you're going to merge together here. You can add more or remove them if you would like to. But in this case, we have already checked and these are the ones we want to merge. So we will click Merge Contacts. Okay. Then we can close this. We're just left with Crazy for Candy. And the destination contact will retain all the information that it had because it's the primary contact on record. But with the merging of contacts, it will also pick up any information that the contacts you merged into it had that the destination contact did not. So for example, Crazy for Candy did not have a mobile phone number. However, the contact that we merged into Crazy for Candy did. So now Crazy for Candy has a mobile phone number on their record. We can also see in Chatter that this contact was merged with another contact and what the ID of that contact was.